Well, Ryan, Canaan, great to have you on Talking Church. For those who are watching, we are in my office because our podcast studio, as maybe those have heard, is under construction right now. And so we wanted to make this happen. Canaan, you're in town and from Seattle, and we wanted to make it happen, but we are in an office, and so we kind of feel, for those who've been watching Talking Church for a while or listening, it kind of feels old school. And so we're just excited to have you guys and talking worship today. And so, Canaan, can you maybe introduce yourself? For those who have been listening, been around River Valley, they know Ryan and overseeing songwriting in River Valley worship and leading at campuses for many, many years. But Canaan, tell us a little bit about you and what God's been doing in your life recently.
For sure. Yeah. So I'm from Seattle, Washington, the greater Seattle area, from Renton, Washington, an amazing church called New Life out there. Been planted there for the last 7 years. My wife and I are both on staff. I help oversee worship across campuses and lead at our central campus. And it's been a blast. Yeah. So do some songwriting there, lead Sundays and all that good stuff.
And what's funny is the way we met is I DM'd you on Instagram not too long ago, but I don't know when did More Like Jesus come out?
So that was August last year.
So right around that time when it was a new song, it was on some playlist that I found or somebody posted. I can't remember, but I remember finding it and I just added it to my playlist. I think I said it to you, Ryan, like, hey, this is a cool song. And didn't think anything more of it other than it was just on my worship playlist that I listened to. And then I just kept seeing it. Some social media posts came on my feed, and then I saw your face for the first time. I'm like, oh, he's who sang it. And then I just kept hearing it over and over again. And, we're always looking for just people to collab with and write with. And so I talked to you, Ryan. I said, if I invite this guy, I've never met him. I have no idea, but would you write with him? And you're like, for sure. And so I found out you're actually AG. You have so many mutual friends.
Yeah.
And so it just worked out. And so you're in town to write. And
thank you.
I'm glad I DM'd you.
Yeah, thank you for the chance. I was like, man, he's putting a lot of trust in me for just quick DM conversation, but it's been awesome. It's been super fun. Yeah.
Great few days.
What? Maybe just take us in. Part of the topic I want to talk about today is how we can remain in a posture of worship and worshiping God, even though you kind of do it for your jobs. And I think for people who work in the church or even who are super strong servants, maybe they're volunteer worship leaders, maybe they're musicians that are always on the stage and not necessarily in the corporate worship setting. They're the ones leading it. But even before we get to that, talk about writing together. And I mean, you guys hadn't met until a day and a half ago, and now you're writing songs together. Songwriting seems like a personal thing. How do you just jump in? And both of you have done this in Nashville and in different places to where you're meeting somebody and then within an hour of meeting them, you're now having to write a song, create art together. I mean, I'm sure that can be challenging, but how do you get your headspace to, I don't even know this person and now I have to create art with them that's a very personal thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll start with, it is kind of a case-by-case basis, but with Canaan, for example, there is some natural overlap there. We're both pastors, worship pastors, working in the local church. And so right away, we're looking at songs and song creation and songwriting through the same lens. And what I mean by that is we have people in mind. We have a community in mind when we're writing and creating. And when you have a group of people in mind, when you're songwriting, it automatically pushes you to kind of this servant songwriter attitude. And so I wasn't surprised whatsoever when we sat down yesterday, had a little chit chat, but then when we broke into actually making a song, it was just it was kindred spirits because of we're in local ministry together, different churches, different part of the country. But that's a big deal right away.
Yeah, 100%. And Ryan's been doing it way longer than me, but this has been a really cool, encouraging experience because it does feel just natural. It feels like family, and I think that not to be cliche, but I think that God has a huge hand in that. It's kind of the spirit that unifies what we're doing, and coming from the local church context is huge because we write for our church every single week, and we're keeping that in mind. And it's different than if you're okay, what's a pop song that we could write, for the radio or something like that. It's no, we're writing this for people to connect to testify with. And in that corporate setting. Yeah, so I'd totally agree with that.
How do you manage that tension of we want to write a song that's catchy and that people love to sing versus songs that you feel passionate about? I'm sure there's songs that, are even chord progressions and lyrics and everything. There's people listening that they don't care if it's super unique or they want it to be easy to sing. But then you're also writing this for creative people who want to hear something new. And like, how do you live in that tension of corporateness versus, not that they're against each other. I guess, I think you guys
For
know
sure.
what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think that sometimes I'd love to hear your take on it too, but as creative people, we overthink that a little bit more than the people we're ministering to. Like we're like, oh man, that sounds like this song. Because all we're doing is listening to music all the time and leading songs for years. It's like, that sounds like that one Hillsong song from 10 years ago. We should probably stray from that. And like, there's some validity to that. You don't want to just like rip off a melody or something. But I think that sometimes I'll get too caught up in that just as someone that's always listening to music, always playing music and trying to be different. It's like, that's a big artistic thing. Like, that's overplayed. We should try something else. And sometimes that's really good. Like I think that even some of the songs we wrote the last couple of days feel fresh and different, but it's not different for the sake of being different. And, we always have to write with people in mind. Like, can they sing this? Is this a mouthful or does this make sense? Even just with a group of people singing it together. So I think that sometimes creatives overthink it more than people that we're ministering to.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think thinking about the average person who comes to church, the mom, the dad, the student, the older generation, they only have so much bandwidth to take in everything that we throw at them during a church service. And that's not just worship. It's also people giving announcements and information. A little bit, it's the sermon, it's the word of God as well, how the preacher preaches and their approach. But especially with worship, whether it's 15 minutes or 20 minutes, 4 songs, 6 songs, 3 songs. Being in the business of it, being a worship pastor who consumes songs all the time is kind of inundated with trends and what's working, what's not working, who's doing this, who's not doing that. Our bandwidth is a lot wider and deeper to be able to take songs in and think about them with like a critical eye or kind of exercising that muscle of analyzing songs on behalf of like, I want to get better at this. This is my craft, stuff like that. Yeah. Average person walking in is like, I just need to touch from the Lord. Yeah. I need an encouragement. I need a little sliver of hope to get me through the next week, or I need direction, all these things that are really vibrant and important. And so realizing that over the years, you're like, how can I give something to the people that's fresh and creative and all that stuff, but like kind of whittle down and give something that's laser focused, whether that be in one song, the topic, or even a little bit bigger thought, like within this 20 minutes of a worship set, giving people this one clear moment to grab onto. Because most people, whether it's an energy thing or it's a church context thing, they don't have so much to give all the time. That makes sense,
How do you feel when you're leading worship and, there's people that are leaning in, they're worshiping, it's exciting, you can tell they're worshiping God. But then there's other people that are there on the weekend that are just standing there, hands in their pockets, just staring at you. Like, has that, how have you processed it can feel, when you're in a space that's maybe a worship night and it's all like seasoned believers or a church conference with pastors, they understand and they get it. But on a weekend, sometimes you have people that show up, it's their first time in church ever. We both live in cities where that's not uncommon for people to say, I've never been to church before. How have you, like, again, maybe I'm more just getting in your head, like it doesn't have to be a spiritual thing, but like, what are you thinking when someone is, row 2, row 3, and they're just sitting there just staring right at you. They're not worshiping. They're just kind of watching.
You never get used to it in a way, even after doing it for a little while. But I'll never forget the experience that I had being pretty young, my mid-20s, and leading worship like on a Saturday night at River Valley. and kind of catching a glimpse or catching eyes with a guy, 30 years old or so, fourth row, absolutely frozen, like literally frozen, not standing, barely moving, definitely not singing. And the look on his face was like overwhelmed, but maybe not in a great way. Not like overwhelmed, this is incredible, but overwhelmed, like kind of shocked and stunned. And I kid you not, that same guy came and found me after that service. And this is something you never forget because it was so stark in my mind of what my preconceived notion was of what was going on in this man during worship. I was thinking, man, this is a little much for him, or this is not something that he's vibing with. And he came up to me with tears in his eyes. I just got to tell you, I've never experienced anything like that in my life. And this is not a sensationalized story. This actually happened. And I was early on in ministry, and that has helped me tremendously throughout the years, because there's been countless pictures like that man that you see every week now. And I always remember that story of, I have no idea what God's doing in the unseen, and he could be doing a real deep work.
Yeah. And
that person in particular, they might just be so caught up in a way that they can't even move their mouth. They can't even sing. It's kind of crazy and cool.
Yeah, no, I've been blessed to have similar opportunities where it's like a testimony of someone that I thought there's nothing going on. You know, like they don't want to be here. They probably got dragged here and they're just waiting it out. And similar things. I think for me, on another angle to it, I've had to deal with sort of a fear of man thing before, or even like I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I'm an achiever by nature, I think, and externally sometimes the temptation for me is to gauge how well I'm doing leading a room by the physical expression and engagement. And God's really had to break that off of me the last couple years in particular, where it's just like, man, he's sovereign. He's doing, if I'm honoring him, of course there's practical ways to do our part. We work hard, we rehearse, we have our eyes open, and engage with the room. So there's things to do. But really it's like, if he's being honored in it, that's what matters, and he'll do the rest. And I've really tried to detach from just, it's hard, I miss it sometimes, but like looking out and gauging how well I'm doing, quote unquote, by the engagement of the room that I can't even really control anyway. And also I had the hard realization that when I'm the one sitting and worshiping, I'm less expressive than what I hoped that people would be. And it's kind of funny because I'm a pretty extroverted person anyway by nature, and I'm here kind of just like sometimes just sitting like here, eyes shut, head down. I'm like, man, this is what our people. I know, for real. And I had to come to terms with that too. I'm like, I'm not even out here jumping and dancing around like this. So yeah.
No, that's true. That's true. I think that it's often to judge people off of one moment, and obviously we know worship isn't about how expressive we can be. God bless the Baptist worship leaders. Because there ain't no hands up there. But it's like, if it was about how expressive we would be, then worship would be, much more conditional than I think it is. And I do think there are conditions to our worship that I think like, oh no, I worship him in everything I do. Yeah, but also like not in your sin, not in your a hard heart. But in the same way, I think we can worship God in more ways than just, no, I'm going to jump up and down, throw my hands in the air, spin around, even though that in more Pentecostal circles that can be more normative than not. I do think at times, like at least myself, and again, this is a very broad brush statement. I don't mean it to be an overgeneralization, but I find that many new Christians who are naturally expressive. They were an expressive person before they were saved. Yeah. They can be so expressive in worship. And then you look at some of the most mature believers in faith, like I think of your father-in-law, Ryan, and it's like worship is like a core part of who he is. He did your in-laws did my marriage mentoring. So like I know them so well, and just stoic, meek person, worship leader, but doesn't have to be super expressive and jumping up and down and going, but it's so authentic. And so I do think there is this weird place of we want to be expressive and to show what God has done for us, But if that becomes our goal, then we've made it about us instead of about
Right.
God anyways.
Yeah.
And so that's a tension I have, even in culture of, as a pastor, well, you need to say amen to me and respond to me.
Yeah.
Well, is that a tradition or is that a
Is that for
biblical?
you
no,
or
that,
is that for
that
God?
yeah,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
No.
But I think sometimes we make it out, man, they weren't responding to that message. And just like you said with worship, I'm sure there's pastors that are listening that have said that person that looked like they weren't even paying attention came up to me and said, that was the best message I've ever heard. You know, or even better, what a great speech. You know, and the amount of times I hear that.
What a
I'm
great
like,
performance.
well, yeah,
I get that all the
yeah.
time.
You're
Yes,
like,
dude.
it wasn't that. And you want to be like, it's not a performance, but you just have to say, hey, I'm glad God used
Yeah.
me for sure.
You know the heart, yeah.
What, kind of getting back to what I said earlier, you're doing this every week. I mean, you're professional worship leaders, worshipers. How do you live in that tension to where, I don't know, I mean, maybe a service here and there, you can get out into the congregation, but overall, it's still probably hard to turn it off, right? Even if you're in a worship, you're like, oh, that's an interesting chord progression, or oh, they changed that rendition, or oh, wow, there's a key change. You know, just things that maybe non-musicians or worship leaders don't think about. How have you learned to like, I can't just worship for my job. How have you turned that off? Or maybe it's not even the right language. How have you shifted your posture of, no, I'm here to worship God. I'm not here to lead always, but that is what you're asked to do a lot. So again, there's a lot of questions wrapped up in that.
Yeah, for me, it was like a context shift. And again, it was something I learned along the way when I was a little bit younger. And the concept is, you know, God's activity in my life, his working in my life, the way he speaks, the way he moves, the way he makes me more like him. The corporate worship setting is not the primary place for that activity. And when I was younger, I kind of put that expectation on that. Like, I'm a 25-year-old worship leader. I'm leading in a big group of people in church. And I'm also thinking like, this is the gauge of my relationship with God, is how amazing this went, or how clunky it was, or how energetic this was or not. And I started to use that as the primary gauge for like my complete holistic relationship with God. And then quickly the Lord helped me understand that, you know, his activity in my life, he's doing very important things with me and through me and in me on Monday and Tuesday, when I'm driving in the car, when I'm washing dishes, when I'm obviously reading the word in a quiet space. And I can think of very impactful moments in my walk with the Lord that happened in those very mundane spaces. And it's not at all like taking away from the power of corporate worship or the gathered church. Some of the most amazing things I've experienced have also happened in that context. But when I was younger, I kind of put the onus all on that experience. Like, if I don't see angels descend into this room during song 4 of this worship set, then me and God we're not good. We're not.
You guys don't have that every week?
We were singing Fresh Wind, and there was not a wind.
Yeah.
There was no wind.
There was no fresh wind in this place. It was hot in our auditorium.
Kind of funny, kind of tongue in cheek, but honestly, I would have some of those conversations with myself as a 23-year-old, like, because I had such an expectation, and so that's what I've learned.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And like in two different angles of it. Like for one, I think as my job, because like for sure we lead and we sing often. But for me, I'm like, man, I get paid mostly to lead and administrate and team build than even singing. That's kind of how I approach it too. Like, so that's one angle. Like that's 8-10% of my time, and so there's a whole other layer of a mantle of leadership I feel like I need to carry, and pastoral care, that sort of thing. But the other side of it is I feel I've really tried to stay close to the Lord and ask him to keep this fresh in me, that I need this just like everyone else here needs this. And we're singing testimonies, we're singing truth about God. And I've really, like before, recently, but as I was coming up in it, there was times when I was just kind of like, oh, this is a good song, or oh, this one's gonna hit, or oh yeah, I've sung this a million times, I don't even have to think about it. And I was just kind of disengaged and just trying to like lead the room physically, right? So, but then I'm like, man, I need God to keep it fresh in me, that as I sing goodness of God or whatever, that I'm testifying to what he's done in my life, and he does a work in me in that moment too. And that kind of keeps it fresh as well. Like, it's a part of my lifestyle, not just something I do for other people.
Yeah,
It's for all of us.
I had to realize that, God, almost in a way, God cares much more about me, not just as a worship leader with that worship leader hat on, but he cares a lot about me as all the other roles that I carry in this life, whether it be husband, father, friend, follower of Jesus, follower of leadership. And I don't get those things right all the time. Surprise, surprise, I'm not perfect. And so I'm falling short every day in all these important areas, just like the rest of us. And being face to face with that reality of like, I have some work to do as a friend. I have some work to do as a father, as a husband. And it's those realizations, those moments that, again, propel you into true worship. Like, just like you said, Canaan, like, I need this. When I'm singing this song, I've said it multiple times in this past year or two, like, as I'm leading, like, I need this. Let's sing this together. I need this. I'm singing it with you, not just trying to get you to sing it.
Yeah.
We're doing this together because I need it just as bad as you do, know. And there's an authenticity piece to that is special.
Speaking of authenticity, are there moments you can think of that you went, wow, that did not go the way I thought it was going to go to, or that was a #worship fail, that maybe you were pumped about it beforehand, or something went totally awry that people who are listening can either empathize with, or they can get joy in your suffering?
Well, I mean, so like my team jokes around with me that I'm the best at forgetting lyrics that I wrote. Like what we write songs at our church too, and I'll like remember everyone else's songs, but I forget the ones that I helped write. So I mean, that's like a consistent.
Because when you forget them, you can just change them because it's your song.
Yeah. We're writing in real time right now. But like just a worship fail for fun. Like when I first started leading worship at our church, I was like 19 and I was wanting so bad for everybody to like me. And I was just up there, I'm like, oh man, okay, I gotta like be all professional, ready to go. And I literally don't even know how this happened to this day, but my mic stand somehow like was loose from this point right here. And so it's like the middle point if you're just listening. And it just totally fell off mid-song, like mid-fast song. It was like a celebration song and I was playing guitar and it just like fell off. And I was trying to like screw it back on like for a second in a panic. And I just took my mic off and was standing there awkwardly with the guitar. So that was fun. I don't know if anyone else has had that, but my mic stand broke my first time leading at my church.
I have countless ones. I mean, I have countless ones. One is a really quick snapshot is I was in an arena type setting with a lot of people. And it was really early on in my ministry career. And it's obviously felt like a really, really big deal. And I've been doing this a little while, so this is going to date me a little bit. Like tracks and all that was pretty new and pretty cutting edge. Not many people were trying to do that.
Yeah, what's able to?
Yeah. And so there's a lot of bugs to work out in that. And the drummer, who was amazing but new at this whole thing, started the wrong click for the wrong song. We didn't know that. And it started with me on acoustic guitar and singing. That was the intro of the song. And it was completely wrong tempo. And as I opened up my mouth to sing it, like it was like the whole world crashing down because I knew
something's wrong.
This is really wrong. And we did not get out of it. We kind of limped along through the song to get through it. And man, it's like you just never want to come out again to public at that point. You never want to see another's face. You're just so embarrassed.
Well, you see those videos where they're like, hey, stop.
We didn't do that. We're going to start it again. That. But as a young kid, it's there's no stopping this. I can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I would have.
Because you're like, I know that the stopping it and the awkwardness of that will be less bad than us fixing it.
I did not know that at the time. I mean, I thought just man up and get through it.
Yeah,
It was horrible.
I was playing bass at Apple Valley once, and my ears went out right away in the first song. And I'm playing, and on our stage, like we don't have wedges or anything, so it's literally your ears are like your only thing. And I'm playing, and I can't hear a thing.
Mm-mm.
And I'm looking around at everyone, and I kind of could see like the keyboard player looking at me and the drummer looking at me. And I played the whole song, and probably like, I don't know, 80% of the song. And finally, I just stopped playing. I'm like, something's not right. And then, go to the next song, play that song, the whole set. I have no ears.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get done. I go, that first song sounded kind of weird. They said, yeah, we transposed that right before we said we're changing the key from G to A.
Wow.
And I'm like, I didn't hear that. And the fact that I didn't have any ears. So I literally played 80% of the song in the wrong key. And I couldn't hear anything. So
the Jazz Odyssey.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, as a bass player, I was just sliding around. But yeah, I've countless moments like that. But it just gives us joy in our moments. It takes us less seriously.
It does. It's good.
One of the things that I think we struggle with in ministry a lot, but I think this probably lends itself to worship maybe even more than anything, is we've all heard the phrase, don't let your reality affect your theology. But there's things you're going through, and Pastor Rob has kind of been keen on this too, to say, don't bring your burdens to the worship service as the worship leader. And again, it's some people listening will say, well, what do you mean? We bring our burdens to the cross. The differentiation that he's trying to say is you are leading people in worship. They all have burdens. They all have needs. We're not here to dump our emotional baggage on them. We're here to lift them up and point them more to Jesus. But there are things that you're going through in your life that are real, whether that be a health issue, whether that be a family issue, whether that be a stress in your life. And then you're going up there and you're having to lead, and you're singing songs that are hard for you to even sing and believe. Talk about that tension to where, how do you get your mind right? And again, I think this is pastors, this is for volunteers, this is for worship leaders, for everybody. But again, I think it does lend itself to where in a sermon, you kind of can share some of that authenticity, and that's a valuable thing. Yeah. But in worship, sometimes, there's jokes where you see on Instagram where it's like the worship leader on the fourth song, like, hey, I just want to just share a moment about what I'm going through right now. It's like, it's not about you. Whereas the sermon, again, is kind of a blend of those two. How have you managed that tension?
You want to go first?
Hey, sure, I'll go real quick. I think that, so just a little caveat, like I think sometimes there's things that God will highlight to me or to other people, maybe not in the like, hey, let me tell you this 5-minute story about how my dog died and like, let's all cry together real quick. And, not like derailing it, but like moments of authenticity or transparency of what you're going through that could help people in the room. So I think that there's a facet to it that's true of that. But yeah, I think that worship in large part is declaring and testifying to what we know to be true, not necessarily what we're feeling and going through. So even if like, there's been times when I've been under what feels like immense stress or in the middle of a really hard thing where, like we sing Take You at Your Word by Cody Carnes, right? Like I'll take you at your word. If you said it, I believe it. I've seen how good it works. And like, I'm in the middle of like, I haven't seen it yet for this situation, but I'm coming from history with God where I know that he's good and we're singing these truths about him. So in that way, it can even be authentic to be like, man, I'm feeling awful right now, but these things that we're declaring are true, period. God never changes. And so there's like a part of it where I'm like, we can sing this authentically, because it's just about who God is. And then also, as a worship leader, and maybe for leaders that are watching this, like, there's been times when I just told my team in the back, like, hey, I'm going through something really tough right now. Can you pray for me? And then they pray for me, and so that's like within my team, and we live life together a little bit more. It's more like a small group. And then we go out together and declare the truth about God that transcends the circumstance. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, and our pastors, and if you're, serving a leadership team or serving under a pastor, and they ask you, hey, bring faith, bring leadership to these moments when you're leading. They're not asking you to be inauthentic, and they're not asking you to like suck it up and
right.
It's just a really clear, precise form of servanthood. Like you're taking the taking on the mantle of a servant, meaning you're going to put other people before yourself. So you might be going through some stuff, but to be a great worship leader, you got to be a great servant. And that's just one of the other countless ways you can do that. I'm putting my stuff aside for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. And I'm going to focus on what really matters, which is people connecting with the Father, people connecting with the presence of God. And, corporate worship, one of the best definitions, there's many definitions, but one of the greatest definitions I've heard is corporate worship is all about remembering. You're just recalling the character of God, the truth of God, the story of God. You're rehearsing that because we need reminding of who God is kind of all the time. And so you can be in a mess yourself personally, and you can say, I'm going to bring faith and I'm going to bring optimism and hope to this 20 minutes, this 30 minutes. And the now and not yet might be true. And I'm going to just rehearse the goodness of God to help remind me of something that may not be quite there yet, but I know it's going to get there, And so whether you're leading on the stage or part of the congregation, key to remember that worship is about remembering,
Yeah, I mean, I think the root of that comes from not trying to be a distraction against how good God is and how much he has to offer us or how much he already has offered us. And there is that tension point to, am I being a distraction for them to connect with God? And I think this goes across a lot of different layers, to song selection, to how, getting into some of the kind of minute details of, some people would say, oh, a guitar solo in a worship song is off limits because that was so distracting. You made that about you. But then on the other side, you go, I don't know. I mean, I see it in scripture. There's times where like music can honor God. Could the guitar player be making it about them? Yeah. But could they just be using their instrument to worship God just like someone uses their voice?
Absolutely.
And so I think there's that tension to that. The same thing with the way we dress. If someone dresses cool, is that distracting to someone? Maybe. And again, what's cool? The other thing could be true if someone dresses not cool. Could that be distracting to somebody? Is it about uniformity, that they look cohesive, or is it about that they don't look too expensive? There's all these things that I think it's easy to criticize, but then when you look at it from the alternative, right? Because you say, well, I don't think people should wear streetwear on stage because it's disrespectful. Okay, so should we wear suits? Well, no, that's kind of weird. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Great thought.
Should we wear, what should we wear then?
Great thought.
Well, you should wear only the things that I feel comfortable. Well, what about them over here? And again, I'm making it complicated because it is complicated. But are there things that you guys have processed through to where, again, how expensive clothes are, how wearing fake brands. I mean, there's so many things that have made its way into pop culture. I think most of this is just because social media has allowed us to have access to stuff that we never used to have access to. Like, I didn't know what the worship leader down the road was wearing before because I didn't go to his church. But now I know what every worship leader is wearing and every pastor is wearing, and every church screen graphic. Oh my gosh, they had way too much fog. And you're like, okay. I don't know. I think it can be easy to start picking at those things, but I also think we shouldn't just push them aside and not acknowledge them either. It's a tension for sure. And hopefully you guys can give us the true answer of what should be done and what is too far and not far enough, so that we can just settle it once and for all.
Yeah. I think we have the answer.
I think I'll give you a short answer on this one. It's like, I think about myself when I was 25, or even younger than that, when I was in college, and you started to see glimpses of this band, Hillsong United, and they were dressed for the time like really fashion forward, and I was kind of a artsy, I don't know, surprised. I was a kind of an artsy, creative college kid, and seeing that and seeing them lead with conviction and sing the truth and do it in a way that was young and fresh, it was a life-changing for me and for many others my age. And so that seems like that's the godly part of it, right? It's like, wow, how amazing that people look like me, these guys were writing songs, and I knew that they were like the same type of music that I did, but they were completely sold out to the local church and to following Christ. I mean, it was a shift. It was a huge shift. And now here I am. I'm just gonna say I'm not in my 20s anymore, and I guess I'll say I'm not in my 30s anymore as well. So I'll just say that. But now I think about when I get ready, when I get dressed go lead worship at church. You know what I'm thinking? I'm like, I want to be myself for sure, but how nondescript can I be? You know, where it's like, I don't want people to think about, I don't want people to think about like how much I spend on my clothes but I really don't.
What's so interesting to me is that as somebody who I kind of speak of myself as a translator not necessarily in language, but in I'm not a creative as many people say I am,
sure.
But I'm also not a creative.
Yeah, for sure.
And I kind of find myself in the middle to where I'm talking to people. I understand business. I majored in business. I'm an Enneagram 3 achiever. I love that side of it. But I have this respect and have that creative side of me. It's that I'm a 3-wing 4, so I have that little bit of creativity in me. I'm married to a super creative person, and so I feel like I really understand both sides. And what I'm getting at is, to you, what is very nondescript,
there you go,
could be super
That's a great thought.
out there to somebody. And I think that's actually what's happening in the church a lot, is that we're misunderstanding. And again, I'm not saying there aren't people that are going over the top. There aren't people that aren't being poor stewards. Not what I'm saying. But I'm saying I think more often it's a misunderstanding of a personality and who God has made someone to be, that to you said, I just put on the least distracting, most nondescript thing that I could wear still feeling like myself and remaining authentic. And to you, it's like the whole like skinny jeans joke that lasted even after skinny jeans were not even a thing. And here
just
I am.
When lead pastors began wearing skinny jeans.
Exactly. But it's like, it's a misunderstanding of culture. And I'm not even criticizing that joke. I just think that we're not understanding people to who they are, and we're making something that isn't a main thing into a main thing. Really, and what does Jesus say? Blessed are the pure in heart. And he doesn't say blessed are the pure. Now, I think he obviously means that as well. But what he's saying is, blessed are those whose motives are pure. In Samuel, we often quote the verse that men look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. I think that can be abused in people. Oh, well, men looks at that. Okay. We should be more fearful that the Lord looks at our heart. Mm-hmm. But I do think that because of that, we shouldn't judge people based upon our own conviction about something that is not a biblical truth or conviction. It's I don't know. I would never spend that much money on something. This is the last thing I'll say, and then Canaan, I'll let you finish. And then we got to wrap up because people who are listening have things to do. But I was talking to a friend, and he was talking to one of his mentors, not a believer, but worth tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in net worth. And he said, oh man, I just got these new binoculars, and they are so expensive. He said, oh my gosh, they are just so expensive. I can't even believe I spent that much money on these. It's crazy. And he's like, really? He said, yeah, like they're awesome. They have self-stabilization. Like they're super nice. And he's like, what? You said they're really expensive. Oh, they're so expensive. I can't believe I bought them. How much were they? He's like, they were $300.
Yeah.
That's why he's got a high net worth right there.
Great.
Right. But to him, he never could imagine himself spending $300 on that. The dude's worth tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. He lives in an 8,000 square foot home, has like 5 cars and all this, but he spent $300 on binoculars. And it's what we value.
How we value, how we define it.
You drove in here with a $70,000 truck, and you're mad that he spent $100 on a hat because you would never spend $100 on a hat. Yeah. And again, it's not apples to apples, but I just think it's interesting to think, maybe God made me different and value different things. If I sense a hardened heart or a heart that is motive on gaining recognition and accolades for myself, if I sense that spirit, I'm going to address it. But if I sense they're living authentic, they're being a steward, they're leaning into what God's saying, I often find the people who are most critical, especially vocally and on social media, they're dealing with stuff themselves and they don't know how to handle it. So it's easy to criticize others. And again, I'm not saying no one's immune to criticism, but again, I took a lot of time to focus on that. But I feel like that is an important thing for us to manage.
It's super good. Yeah, I mean, and so you guys say most of it, but the only other thing I think I could maybe add is just like as a worship leader sitting, I think for creative people, it's really important to sit under authority in general. And so like we serve in the local church context. And so there's so many opinions, like everything we're talking about, all the little, the issues that people might have. It's really purely opinion. Like if you disregard modesty, right? Like it's pretty much just like how much money you spend, whatever the style is, it's all opinion. And so for me, I would just, I defer. And I would encourage other people, if it's like there's any kind of tension, defer to what your lead pastors want. Like what's appropriate for the stage. What our lead pastors checked our dress code that we give out to the worship team and the guidelines that we work off of, and that kind of helps tidy it up a little bit. That was just kind of one thing that kept coming to mind is like, since it is all opinion, I defer to your lead and say, hey, does this matter to you? If it does, then what matters to you and how can we best honor that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not I think it's easy for us as people who desire that kind of libertarian, liberty, freedom mindset as creatives that is often to push the envelope. Mm-hmm. You get a guideline like that and you go, well, I don't agree with this and I don't want to do that. And I think to the other side of the coin, if we want that trust from our leaders, then we also have to give the trust back to them and say, you know something that I don't about people who aren't like me. Because if the church was just full of creative people, we probably could all wear whatever we want. Nobody would say a thing because everyone understands that, but not everyone is creative. And so they're trying to set an environment that is great for others. So again, it goes both ways to say, trust my motives, but also trust their motives, that they're not limiting you because they want you to be not creative or not authentic. They're helping you to lead people into what you're asking them to do. And again, it's a hard tension to live in, but if you're like, I just can't get on board with that, well, then you probably are not under authority in other areas of your life either. And that's for a different podcast. And any final thoughts on anything we talked about, anything related to worship and yourself? I know we've gone down a few different rabbit holes, but I try to give my guests the last word rather than just taking the last 10 minutes of monologue.
I'll just say, we talked a lot about like in the weeds stuff kind of about worship and worship trends come and go. And they're just like any other trends, there's a cyclical nature to it. Things are in and then things are out, things are old and things are new. I'll just say from a worship pastor's heart, I am so encouraged because I really believe that something new is bubbling up in congregational worship. And what that means for us and for our people is that they're going to get another fresh glimpse of God, and which is, there's nothing more important than that, than getting a fresh revelation of who God is and what that means for our own lives. So all the things that we kind of talked about, the nuanced things and like intricacies and details of worship leading, I guess I just want to say I've never been more excited about what God's going to do in congregational worship.
Love it. Yeah, me too. And I think that, if you're a creative person listening to this, if you're a musician, worship leader, maybe you're not a staff leader, but you're just in that realm, like definitely have a local church. We've talked about this offline separately, but it's just like so important to not be a vagabond, not be, even with the authority thing, like sometimes free spirits just want to be like, I don't agree with that, so I'm going to go over here. Where I'm from now, there's a lot of people that will go wherever pays. And that's a good way to not be known by many, to not be cared for and not have a community. You should be in the local church. You should be covered. You should be living in community. And that can be harder sometimes for creative people, but it's super, super important. You'll see the fruit of that in your life, like we have in ours.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. And excited to see the songs and where they go from the writing that you guys have done. And I know that our paths will certainly cross again.
Definitely.
We'll be out in Seattle soon, so
yes, sir.
I try to find my way out there as much as possible.
Come on over.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, see y'all. Hey, thanks so much for listening to Talking Church on YouTube. If you like this podcast, would you like this video so more people can find it, as well as leave a comment? We'd love to know what you liked about this episode, what was most meaningful to you, as well as other topics you'd love to see in the future. And of course, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss an episode. We have awesome episodes coming up. I also want to send you an invitation to River Valley Conference. It's July 8th and 9th, and we are in for an amazing treat because we have Sammy Rodriguez coming. If you've never heard him preach, he is a preacher of all preachers. He's coming. We have Dr. Alan Tennyson coming back, who's going to share his theology wisdom. We have Johnsel and Jenna from Elevation Church that are going to be leading worship, and we're just so excited for all that's going to happen. Of course, Pastor Rob will be there. I'll be there. We'll have amazing breakout guests as well. So if you have not signed up, sign up for River Valley Conference, and we hope to see you here in July, and we hope to see you next week on next week's Talking Church episode.